Hey, what up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you in an episode of the WWE Network's Monday Night Wars series. This would be episode 5, Have a Nice Day, featured on Mick Foley, Mankind from the WWE back in the day, and his huge success helping out the Monday Night Wars. It definitely talks about how, Mick Foley was an underdog in helping WWE overtake Monday Night Nitro, but it was Mick Foley in a series of matches, and most looked at as the 1998 Hell in a Cell at the King of the Ring pay-per-view. They talk heavily in detail about this. I know that very recently was the Have a Nice Day documentary set on Mick Foley that probably was put out right after WrestleMania 29. So it's just about, would that be 2 years, I guess? Maybe a year. I don't know how to subtract years. My brain's not thinking right. It's not too late, but it's a little bit late. But honestly, I know from listening to interviews with Mick Foley and going to Mick Foley's comedy show, I feel a little bit sorry for him, I guess you can say, is that how much the Hell in the Cell was featured on here. I know that Mick Foley knows that that's probably his most popular match that he's ever been in. And that match is the one thing that fans want to talk to him, ask him questions about all the time. But he just carries this stress with him that he's heard and he's been asked and he's answered this question 1,000 times in his life. And he'll probably get it asked 100 times tomorrow is, when he went through a table, did it hurt? And, just every aspect of that. He would love it if he never had to talk about the Hell in the Cell match ever again. But they told a very good story with Mick Foley. Honestly, if it came down to it, if I would watch the Monday Night Wars episode of Have a Nice Day, or if I would watch the Mick Foley documentary, I think I would go with probably the Mick Foley documentary. I think that one is going about, I want to say it's 2 hours. It might be around an hour and a half, but it really covers Mick Foley's whole career. It's definitely one of those sets that I definitely like, because I don't think Mick Foley's going to do anything else in his wrestling career that really needs to be tacked on to that set. I think it really covers everything that he's done in the wrestling business, and anything that from here on out isn't really going to go down as one of the most memorable moments in Mick Foley's wrestling career. The set opened up talking about, basically Cactus Jack wrestling in WCW and him just coming in and him thinking that he was going to become, a megastar in a big promotion and basically live out his wrestling dream of becoming, that wrestling rock star, becoming a rich, successful wrestler. And basically they just wanted him to be a crash test dummy, basically just going out there and just giving up his body, just trying to, help be something new that WCW didn't have. He was on this feeder system where basically he was going to be brought up and built as a big deal. Sting was going to beat him, and then there was basically nothing for him left to go from there. Basically, they talked about, when Eric Bischoff came in, Foley saw the writing on the wall that more than likely he wasn't going to be a star there, so he chose to leave. They didn't go into the fact that, in Germany, Cactus Jack had wrestled Vader, and his head and his ears sort of got wrapped up in the ropes, and the way that the rope snapped, Mick Foley lost his ear. I think it's a well-known story that a lot of people know, and he had to choose between, basically going to the WCW pay-per-view and wrestling and winning the tag team championships, or reattaching his ear. Mick Foley, being the hardcore wrestler that he is, hardcore not probably being the best term for right there, chose going to the show and doing what he does the best, wrestling, and now he has to live his life with a horribly disfigured ear that's never going to be fixed with 1,000 plastic surgeries. It's just weird looking on the side of there. From leaving WCW, he found a home in ECW. ECW, a company that everybody knows as being, basically the hardcore legends. And he was the king of hardcore. He went in there, he found himself, not really getting over to the fact that he thought he was, because everybody was wrestling with the same style that he had. You see him getting beat up by the Sandman, Terry Funk, wrestling against Tommy Dreamer. And basically, Paul Heyman talks about him transforming his character to becoming anti-hardcore just to make himself stand out a little bit more in this company, where basically he wouldn't wear his long hair down and he would tuck it up into a nice ponytail. His hardcore matches turned into, basically matches of arm locks and shoulder locks and wrist locks and things like that, trying to slow down the action to have the ECW fans boo him and basically think that he was boring. Somewhere along the way, Mick Foley was trying to get into WWF. It was always a dream of him to get there. And he had Jim Ross fighting in his corner, trying to get Vince McMahon to hire him. Vince McMahon didn't really see anything in Mick Foley, but basically just gave in to Jim Ross. They finally brought him into the company. From there, he was supposed to start wrestling under a name of Mason the Destroyer, I believe is what it was supposed to be. Mankind came up with the idea of basically calling himself Mankind, and basically he thought that he wanted to sort of talk about the fall of mankind and how basically, through all of the hard stories that he had been through, he found himself, at his best in boiler rooms and like down in the sewer playing with rats and things like that. Mick Foley talks about how he didn't really like the rat, but basically knew that was his meal ticket. So basically he just, played with the rat. I wish they would have talked about the Mind Games pay-per-view at In Your House, where Mick Foley probably wrestled one of the best wrestling matches of his career against Shawn Michaels, but that was sort of skipped over to make time for, the probably at least 20 minutes that they talked about the Hell in the Cell pay-per-view and everything that went about there. Everybody knows about every story from there. After that, Vince McMahon walked up to Mick after the show and told him that he, was very appreciative for everything that Mick Foley did for him that night. Definitely, that's one of the moments that they show a lot of people from WCW. They talk about, they show Kevin Sullivan, they show Tony Schiavone, they show Larry Zbyszko, just basically throwing their hands up, saying there's nothing that WCW can do to top that. That was the point where they should have just, mailed Vince a plaque and just said the Monday Night Wars are over, we surrender, start waving the white flag, because there was nothing that they could do from there. Mick Foley won over Vince McMahon by doing a series of interviews with Jim Ross, where basically Jim Ross had done a series of interviews with Goldust, where they sort of showed the true side of Goldust, where they basically exposed him as Dustin Rhodes. They talked about being married to Marlena and having a child, Dakota, at home, and just basically showing that there's more to life than just actual wrestling with Goldust. Mick Foley took a different spin on these series of interviews, where basically he talked about his life, where he talked about growing up wanting to be Dude Love, but he did it in character as sort of like these memories or the things that have held him down. To the point of that's where he is in his life right now. Vince McMahon thought that these interviews were really, really great. Mick Foley, went through the progressions of bringing back Dude Love. They have an awesome, showing of an awesome match at the Madison Square Garden Monday Night Raw, where basically it's supposed to be a Falls Count Anywhere match against Triple H. Where basically Dude Love says that he's not able to do the match. Mankind says he's not able to do the match. But Cactus Jack shows up, and he's the one who actually comes out there. And Triple H sells it like none other. Just basically just flipping out, like, I'll fight anybody in the world, but I'm not going to fight Cactus Jack. And Triple H really puts over the fact of Cactus Jack and having the history of all of the Japanese, war matches with the bombs going off in the ring and the barbed wire and everything like that. Just basically getting over the fact that he's going to do anything it takes to win this match. Mankind slowly went back to wrestling as Mankind again. And he just basically felt his character sort of starting to slip, where the fans didn't really get behind him anymore. He changed his character up to where he started being more of a comedy style wrestler, I guess you can say. Not really to the point of like Santino and Eric Young. But basically, you know, there was a lot more humor in his promos, which led to him, you know, doing the Rock and Sock connection, bringing together him and The Rock, where basically they were, you know, fire and ice, where one guy was, you know, this stuck-up, arrogant, jockey kind of guy, and the other guy was this sort of oafish, oversized, you know, just older wrestler guy who definitely was not anything cool. And somehow there was this connection where they get together, where they talk about, you know, doing the This Is Your Life with The Rock, where they bring back The Rock's football coach, The Rock's first girlfriend, The Rock's geometry math teacher, whatever it was, and just basically Vince McMahon not really liking the segment, Vince Russo knowing that you know, it was going to work, and basically it blew WCW out of the water. It drew 9 million viewers with just something so basic that didn't have anything to do with wrestling, just two guys goofing around with some other people inside of the ring. Brought 9 million viewers to Monday Night Raw, where everybody was watching at one point. The Rock and Mick Foley couldn't believe the numbers that they brought in. Somewhere in the middle of that, you know, Mankind becomes champion for the first time, and they show Stone Cold Steve Austin coming down and hitting The Rock in the face with a chair. And that was honestly one of the loudest pops that I've ever heard in my life. That is a monumental Stone Cold pop. Stone Cold says that he never had a pop as big as the Road Warriors did back in the day. But that, to me, that one just got loud, and it stayed loud and echoed, and people you know, cheered for him the whole way he made his way to the ring. Most of the time when the fans pop for people, it's boom, and you know, he's standing on the stage, and then it's sort of over, and everybody's anticipating him getting to the ring. People cheered for him all the way down to the ring with him hitting The Rock. It even got even louder. People, you know, got to see Mick Foley pin him for the 1, 2, 3, and they blew up that, you know, Mick Foley had come from nowhere to win the championship. They talk about Tony Schiavone burying him on WCW, and Mick Foley saying that it really took the thunder away from that night. Tony Schiavone sort of apologizes for what he's done. When he was on the Jim Ross podcast, he apologized for some hard feelings that Bobby Heenan had said about him, basically saying that almost everything Heenan has ever said about him on the internet was true. That, you know, it just was the way it was, and if he could do anything different, he would, but he wishes Bobby would forgive him. I'm sure that Schiavone feels the same way about Mick Foley. He says that he just was told what to say, so he said it. He said he made up the line about that's really going to put some butts in the seats. Mick Foley had his feelings hurt basically because of how hard he had worked in order to reach the championship at the top of the line. I thought that the show, honestly, it started the same as all the other ones, where the first 5 minutes was fluff that we'd seen 5 times now. But the ending was basically just Mick saying, you know, I was having some trouble remembering things. And Vince McMahon says, well, you wrestled your last match. You know, he didn't want this guy turning into a vegetable at his expense. He wanted him to be able to enjoy his life and enjoy his kids and his family and everything like that. So, you know, Foley walked away. They didn't really talk about, you know, this biggest feud of his career in my mind, the feud against Triple H, the one that Triple H, some people say he hates, because a lot of people think that Mick Foley made Triple H. I think that they made each other. I mean, it gave Mick Foley one of the best send-offs in wrestling history. It really wasn't to the amplitude of Ric Flair's WrestleMania 24 send-off, because it was held at, was it Backlash? No, it wasn't Backlash. No Way Out, I believe, is where it was at, the Hell in the Cell match. But, you know, he came back a few times, but definitely, you know, for episode 5, it had to be about somebody big. You know, we've seen the NWO. We saw DX. You know, he's the first guy to get his own. Next week we have Bret the Hitman Hart. It just shows that Mick Foley really was a big deal. I mean, we've still got The Rock. We've still got Stone Cold. I'm sure they can do a whole episode on the Montreal Screwjob. It's fun. We'll see where they go from here. I've loved this series, and I can't wait for the next one. So, peace out, everybody. Mick Foley, 2 thumbs up. Have a nice day.